Yo, the day has finally arrived that we give credit to your favorite Kohai. We got the patron request from Siege Heart. He says that he wants a video about MASH. A lot of people may not know exactly what she is, plus there's not much talk about her in general. By the way, if you haven't already, make sure you guys sign up for the Patreon. You get access to early content and priority on your request. So for whatever reason, we haven't done an exclusive video on MASH, which really is a shame because there's a lot of things that make her character stand out that people often don't give that much credit to. So we're gonna go through some of the main ones, and we're gonna start off with the fact that she is in fact a demi-servant, one of the only demi-servants in the franchise. Now, we've yet to cover demis on the channel, but you can essentially think of it as another counterpart to a pseudo-servant. In the same way that pseudo-servants are the spirit possessing the person and using them as a vessel, with the spirit itself being majority of the personality, the demis are flipped, where majority of the personality is the vessel itself, and they're able to draw from the powers of the spirit while still keeping that core person intact. And while there has been demi-servants in the past and people that are like demi-servants, one of the first people that you think of, pretty much the face of it at this point, is MASH. By law, her being this combination between two different things automatically makes her more layered just by foundation. Another point for her character, she was created as an experiment. Though it may seem like it just by looking at her at surface level, she is not just an ordinary human. And that kind of plays into why she's been able to take that demi role the furthest in the first place. The origin of MASH is that she was created from modified DNA. She was built to be this person that could harbor spirits. By the time that the story rolls around, she had already been created. So again, a lot of those human aspects that you will normally see from everybody else, she has to learn, and she's still learning as she came into her own. And Roman was the one that helped her out with a lot of that. Another point is that the servant that she's currently attached to is Sir Galahad, one of the greatest knights to ever exist. Some say even the greatest knight. If you don't know, Galahad is actually Sir Lancelot's son, and we all know that Lancelot is often touted to be the strongest of the round table. Well, in myth, Galahad is actually the one that beat him in one-on-one combat, so he bested his own father. He pulled up to Camelot and gave him the work. He's also one of the only knights that successfully recovered the Holy Grail when no one else could do it. And this is now something that's been worked into the background of MASH. On top of everything else that she had going on, she also has to juggle the fact that she's kind of sort of Lancelot's daughter, and she also shares the background with Galahad whenever he decides to lend his power to her. Another huge point is that MASH is a character that's been in the works for a very long time. I've seen a lot of people speak on how they much prefer the original characters of Stay Night, but did you know that MASH was supposed to be in Stay Night and she actually got cut out the story? Originally, MASH was supposed to be a character by the name of Tachi, and she was supposed to be one of the orphans that survived along with Shiro, and she would play the exact same role that she did in FGO. She would be a demi-servant, she would be attached to Galahad, and she would carry a lot of the same aspects into the story on top of everything else that was going on in Stay Night. We will for sure get more into that later, but that alone makes her very unique in the sense that Nasu saw her character worthy of being revitalized, and he didn't let that idea go to waste. She still made her way back into his other work as a focal point of an entirely different story. And if you look at the success of FGO so far, it's very clear that that idea wasn't anything to slight at. So if you ever hear somebody talking down on MASH's name for not being one of the OGs, just remember that she is one of the OGs, and she was taken out of the story so she didn't steal all the shine from your favorites. Another point that we have is that she's in the Shielder class. She's one of the only Shielders that exists in the servant pool. Though there may be many people that have potential to be a Shielder, MASH once again becomes the face of that class. Despite her being completely defensive as a character, we've seen a lot of cool elements be born from that. So that's something that we know can be utilized more efficiently now that she's set out the groundwork for everybody else. Another Another point that we have, her shield is actually a relic created from a piece of the round table itself, and that's the reason that she has this connection to Galahad. This becomes even more interesting when you consider the fact that it's that exact piece, this shield, that's being used to call the spirits to Chaldea in general. This is what's being used to bring the spirits to help us along our journey. So beyond it not just being your normal shield, it also stands as the crutch for the entire story itself, because without them, we're nothing. Right? Another point you have is her Ordinax gear, which is something that was constructed for her when Galahad isn't lending his power. Though there is a lot of contention about the way that it looks in comparison to her old outfit, in terms of its function, it means a lot because she's able to get into the field strictly through mechanical means, which once again shows us that if we can find another person with the proper foundation, we can also suit them up with this armor, because we've already seen this done with MASH. And then of course, how could you leave out one of the biggest weapons in the verse to this day, the introduction of MASH bringing back the black barrel from the world of notes. Originally just being a rifle, it has been reimagined for the story of Grand Order, and it functions in a very similar way, allowing us to go against people that we normally should have no business going against. Gods, beasts, aliens, and due to the fact that it is conceptual, there's times where it can pretty much ignore their foundation by using the substance, the material that they exist in the world with, against them. And this honestly was very necessary, because oftentimes I see people talk about the way that MASH is presented in the story and what they don't like about her, but every time they start to name those things, they always go straight to the things that don't make her a unique character. It's never any of these things that actually make her stand out among the rest. On top of the fact that she's just a general joy to be around, that coming of age and coming to know what the world is background is exactly that balance that we need as we go around and destroy everybody else's world and don't bother to look back. She is one of the few glimmers of hope that remain wholesome all the way through, an actual organic wholesome and not the forced relationships that they try to do ever so often. I am glad that they decided to bring her back around and they didn't just let her go to waste. Like I always say, Nasu never lets an idea go to waste. Doesn't matter how long it takes, it will come back around. I can imagine somebody being in the studio and trying to toss an idea to the side and Nasu literally being like, hey, we can use that. I don't know when and I don't know how, but we will use that. And MASH is just one of the many. Honestly, when you think about it, she's really Sig done right. Time and time again, she's faced with this existential crisis of the world being taken away from her. And even when she's told that her life is only supposed to be this long, she still decides to make sacrifices and fight for the betterment of mankind. But in the position that she stands and all the working parts of her background coming together, it actually makes sense and it feels right. Especially when you consider times like when she went down against Goetia, or despite the fact that she's been tortured by Burl, she had every reason to think very little of us, as opposed to somebody like Sig who went through a similar situation, but the emotions were very manufactured. You want to see her thrive, you want to see her understand the world, you want to see her get the best of people like Burl and put them in their place. This coupled with the idea of her relationship with Ritsuka, who as a normal person who's been a regular human from the jump, has been edging on the descent into madness for a very long time. And MASH, once again, is one of those few things that's keeping him out of it. So beyond her importance to the world, she's very important to him because he's out here saving the world, at least from our perspective, and she's doing a really good job at it. This has been very apparently displayed with what happened in the Solomon chapter and the movie. Just the idea of MASH not being around Ritsuka any longer made him lose it, and he started to turn into a completely different person. So a lot of build up into that dynamic plays into the heart of the story in general.